The wind carried dust across an empty highway, and the distant growl of a Harley shattered the silence like a lone thunder in the desert. At an abandoned gas station, a woman stood beside a cracked glass case, holding a worn silver ring. When the engine died and the biker's shadow fell over her, her voice trembled. "My children haven't eaten in 3 days. Will you buy my wedding ring?" Stay till the end, because this story proves that even in hell, mercy still rides. Her name was Mara Quinn, and hope had long since abandoned her. Her life had shrunk into a thick, suffocating silence inside a rusted trailer, lost somewhere along the old Route 66, where the wind howled as if trying to tear away the last traces of what had once been a home. The construction company vanished, the paperwork was lost, and the men in suits told her they were sorry, but there was nothing they could do. Since then, Mara had survived on scraps. She washed dishes in a half-abandoned diner, trading hours for coins, and every night she came back to her trailer with cracked hands and a soul worn thin. Inside, her children slept, wrapped in a blanket that smelled of dust and gasoline, dreaming of a tomorrow that never came. Sometimes, while the wind rattled the thin metal walls, she spoke into the dark, as if her husband could still hear her. She apologized for not being enough, for having nothing left to offer but a wedding ring that no longer symbolized love, only hunger. That night, clouds rolled heavy across the desert sky, and the air carried the taste of an approaching storm when she heard it, the deep, steady growl of a motor coming down the road. It wasn't just a sound, it was a pulse, like a heartbeat refusing to die. The headlights of a Harley tore through the darkness, stopping in front of the old gas station where she stood, clutching a small wooden box. The man who stepped off the bike had the kind of face carved by years and loss, and eyes that had seen more roadside crosses than sunrises. The leather of his vest was cracked and faded, but the patch on his back still burned with pride. Hell's Angels, Arizona Chapter. Cole said nothing. He removed his gloves and watched her quietly. Mara lifted the ring, offering the last piece of her world. Her fingers trembled, but her voice didn't break. "My children haven't eaten in 3 days. Will you buy my wedding ring?" The man stared for a long moment, unblinking. The wind stirred the dust, the flickering neon painted their faces red and blue, and for an instant the entire world held its breath. Something shifted in that silence, because sometimes compassion doesn't arrive on wings. It comes on 2 wheels, carried by a heart that still remembers what hunger feels like. And so, without a single word spoken, began a story the desert wind still whispers about, somewhere in the south.
Cole wasn't a man of many words, but that moment hit him harder than any punch or crash on the open road. He had seen misery before, in the eyes of men who had lost everything, in nameless graves along the tracks, in women who waited for letters that never came. But in Mara Quinn's eyes, there was something else. It wasn't defeat, it was pride. Fragile, trembling, but still alive. The ring weighed almost nothing, yet it carried the weight of a lifetime. Cole held it between his fingers gently, as if touching something sacred. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He reached into his wallet, but she shook her head. "I don't want charity," she whispered. "I just want what we had to still mean something." For a moment, the wind howled through the power lines. The gas station looked like a forgotten shrine, lit only by dying neon and a pale desert moon. Cole stared toward the horizon, the endless asphalt, the sleeping dunes. He knew that somewhere miles away, his brothers were gathered at a roadside bar, drinking, laughing, living. And yet here he stood, in front of a woman who reminded him why he once swore never to turn his back on those left behind. That night, he didn't return to the bar. Instead, he stopped by an old wooden church, pulled out a grease-stained notebook, and wrote a few words. A widow, 2 kids, hunger, faith. Then he started his bike and rode off into the dark, leaving behind the station, the woman, and the echo of his engine like a promise whispered to the wind. The desert swallowed the dust, but not what had awakened inside him. A decision that would change more lives than he could ever know.
Dawn came slow, painting the desert hills in shades of copper and blood. Cole hadn't slept. He had spent the night riding through back roads, trying to make sense of the storm in his chest. The roar of his Harley mixed with the wind, and with every mile he left behind, something inside him hardened, or maybe it finally came alive. It wasn't pity that drove him. It was something deeper, a debt to humanity that life on the road had taught him to repay in his own way. When the sun rose over the rusted signs of the Rusted Cross, the old biker bar that served as the Angel's home, Cole pushed through the door like a man carrying fire in his veins. The air inside was thick with the smell of whiskey, sweat, and gasoline. The Hell's Angels of Arizona were there. Men with faces carved by years, tattoos that spoke of wars no newspaper ever wrote about, and eyes that didn't need explanations. When they saw him, the noise died instantly. Cole set his helmet down on the bar and spoke. "There's a woman out on Route 66, 2 kids, hunger, and a wedding ring worth more than gold." Old Mac, one of the founders, let out a gravelly laugh. "So what? We running a charity now?" Cole didn't flinch. He just stared back and said quietly, "No, we're reminding the world why we still exist." The room went silent again. Then Reyes, the club's mechanic, raised his head. "If hell still has room for loyalty," he said, "then maybe there's still something sacred left on this earth." One by one, the others nodded. Their eyes didn't shine with revenge. They burned with purpose. Outside, the sun began to bake the road. The bikes stood lined up in perfect formation, shining like black mirrors of their souls. Cole climbed onto his, twisted the throttle, and the engine's roar shattered the morning calm. 20 Harleys joined in, thundering through the desert like the heartbeat of something ancient. They carried no weapons, no threats, only the weight of their colors, the scars on their skin, and a code no law could define. What they were about to do had no name, but on the road, not everything sacred needs one. As they rode out, the wind kicked up the sand, wrapping them in a ghostly veil. And over the roar of engines, Cole whispered to himself, no one should have to pawn love just to survive. If you believe loyalty still means something in this world, subscribe to Hell's Road, because this story is far from over. The sun burned high above the desert, and the air shimmered like fire breathing across the highway. The bikes rode in perfect formation, 20 engines growling through the emptiness. From a distance, the small town looked like a mirage of rust and dust. Cole led the pack, eyes fixed forward, the same words looping in his head. A widow, 2 kids, hunger, faith. As they rolled into town, curtains shifted. People peered from behind cracked windows, fear mixed with curiosity. Hell's Angels didn't show up in towns like this without reason, and when they did, silence usually followed like a shadow. But today, they weren't here to take anything. They were here to give back what the world had stolen. The bike stopped in front of Mara's trailer. The sound of chains clinking, engines cooling, dust rising in slow waves. It was a scene frozen in time, like ghosts of the road summoned for a purpose older than words. Cole took off his gloves and stared at the house. The roof sagged, the paint peeled, the windows patched with cardboard. But what struck him most wasn't the decay. It was a line of small clothes hanging between 2 posts, swaying in the wind. That sight hit harder than any story she could have told. "Start," he said quietly. Then everything came alive. Reyes, the mechanic, climbed to the roof with a box of tools. Mac unpacked bags filled with food, rice, bread, powdered milk, canned beans, biscuits. Others headed to the nearby town and came back with jugs of water, clean blankets, wooden boards for the walls. The hum of wrenches replaced the roar of engines. Sweat mixed with dust, and slowly that forgotten corner of the world began to look like a home again. Cole watched in silence, the cigarette unlit between his lips. He didn't need to speak. None of them did. Their work was their prayer. The road was their church. And that woman, though she didn't know it yet, had become their sacred cause. When it was done, Cole stepped inside the trailer. The door creaked open, the air heavy with metal and something else. Hope. On the table lay the silver wedding ring beside a faded photograph. Mara, her husband and 2 kids, smiling before the world fell apart. He picked up the ring gently, almost reverently. Then he opened a small metal box from his saddlebag, a box of relics. Inside were worn patches, steel rings, rusted chains, small fragments of history from brothers who'd come and gone. He took one, a darkened steel ring engraved with the club's initials, HR. He placed it beside the silver band. "Keep it," he said softly. "It's not a gift, it's a reminder that there are still men out there who remember what it means to have a word and keep it." Mara didn't answer. She just stared at him, her fingers trembling as they closed around the ring. In her eyes, he saw something flicker back to life. Not gratitude, not even relief, hope. Cole turned and walked out without another word. Outside, his brothers waited, silent and ready. He put on his helmet, swung a leg over the Harley, and the engine's roar broke the still air like thunder, announcing Judgment Day. They wore their colors like armor, symbols of loyalty stitched in leather, earned through scars in silence. You can carry that same spirit. The official Hell's Road store is linked below, where brotherhood lives in steel, fire, and memory. The pack roared to life again, rolling out as one. Behind them, a small boy stepped out of the trailer, clutching the steel ring in his hand, watching the black silhouettes disappear into the horizon. He didn't know it yet, but that day he had witnessed something real, something that can't be bought, taught, or faked, something that only the road can give.
The sun was sinking behind the desert line, painting the sky in copper and fire, when the silence broke under the dry growl of an old pickup approaching from the road. It was the kind of truck that carried dust and arrogance in equal measure, and behind the wheel sat a man hardened by habit and poisoned by power. The kind who enjoyed reminding the poor how small their hopes were. He was the debt collector, the landlord, the man who came every month with his papers, his smirk, and his indifference. That evening, he carried an eviction notice stamped with the red seal of inevitability. Mara heard the banging on the door, wiping her hands on her apron as she stepped outside. The man didn't wait for words. "You've got 48 hours, lady, not a minute more." Her children peeked out from behind the curtain, and he shot them a glance full of disdain, the kind only men untouched by hunger can afford. She tried to reason with him, her voice trembling, telling him help was coming, that things would change soon. But he laughed, that hollow, metallic laugh that sounds like a lock snapping shut. "No one helps people like you, lady. The world doesn't work that way." And then the air changed. A deep rumble began to rise from the distance, slow, steady, heavy, like thunder rolling beneath the earth. First, one engine, then another, then 20. The sound grew, devouring the silence, echoing off the hills until even the collector's voice faltered. He turned toward the horizon, squinting as a wave of dust lifted from the road. Through it, the silhouettes appeared, 20 Harleys, side by side, cutting through the golden haze of the setting sun. The ground trembled as they approached, The air vibrated like the prelude to a storm. Children ran to the window. Mara didn't move. She knew that sound. It wasn't danger. It was protection wearing leather.
The bikes stopped in formation, a wall of chrome and silence. Cole was the last to kill the engine. He swung a leg off the Harley, boots hitting the dirt with the calm of a man who didn't need to shout to be heard. The dust rose around him like smoke from a church altar. The collector froze. The patch on Cole's back, Hell's Angel's Arizona chapter, glowed in the dying light like a warning from somewhere between heaven and damnation. Cole said nothing at first. He didn't need to. He pulled an envelope from his jacket and dropped it on the hood of the truck. The debts paid. The man hesitated, opened it, his fingers shaking as he counted the money inside. Crisp bills, more than enough. He looked up, his voice caught halfway between gratitude and fear. Cole didn't give him time to speak. "If you ever come back here," he said softly, "bring a soul, or at least something close to it." The man blinked, swallowed hard, and got back into the truck. The engine sputtered, the tires spun, and he disappeared down the road, leaving behind a cloud of dust and shame. Silence settled again, deep and heavy, the kind that feels alive. Mara stood at the doorway, the steel ring clutched in her hand. Cole didn't turn. He lit a cigarette, eyes on the horizon, the smoke curling around the dying light. "Why?" she finally asked, her voice breaking softly. "Why would you do all this for someone you don't even know?" He exhaled slow, his tone rough and quiet, shaped by years of wind and road. "Because once I was hungry too, and someone who isn't here anymore, believed I was still worth saving." No one said another word. Only the low rumble of engines coming back to life, one after another, like a heartbeat of steel echoing across the desert. The dust rose again, the sky burned red, and for a moment, justice and redemption rode together, two shadows vanishing into the dying light. As the dust settled across the road, and the echo of engines faded into the distance, the world seemed to take a breath again. Mara stood in front of her home, heart overflowing, hands still trembling, her mind refusing to accept that what had just happened was real. Her children ran out to her, throwing their arms around her waist, clinging with the desperate strength of those who have lived too close to fear and finally found safety. The air smelled of gasoline and rain-soaked dirt, and for the first time in months, that smell didn't mean despair. It meant life. Inside the trailer, the table remained untouched. The silver wedding ring, the steel ring, and a folded bill left beneath the lamp. On it, written in thick black ink, were a few simple words. "When the road gives you something back, share it. That's how the fire never dies." Mara read the note over and over until her tears blurred the ink. She didn't cry from sadness or even relief, but from something deeper, something she couldn't name. Because at that moment she understood.
Love doesn't always arrive as a promise or a prayer or a gentle hand. Sometimes it roaring down the highway, wrapped in smoke and steel. Sometimes angels don't fall from heaven. They ride out of the horizon. That night, light filled the trailer again. The children ate like they hadn't in weeks, laughing between bites, telling wild stories of the men with wings of iron. Mara watched them in silence, her heart burning with something new, not fear, not longing, but purpose. She knew the world wouldn't change overnight, but she had, and that was enough.
Outside, the desert wind carried the faint echo of engines long gone, rolling softly through the night like a hymn written for the lost and the found. Each growl of distant thunder seemed to whisper her name, a silent oath carved into the heart of the road. Some roads lead to redemption, others to memory. But all of them leave their mark. If you want to keep the fire alive, the official Hell's Road store is linked below, where brotherhood lives beyond the story, and every patch, chain, and ring carries the weight of the code.
Days passed, and with them the dust returned to the roads. The same roads that had witnessed a story the desert promised never to forget. Mara's trailer still stood, but it wasn't the same. Something had changed in the air, a quiet strength, a peace that settled between the laughter of her children and the hush of the nights. Every sunrise came softer, and every night before bed, the children looked out the window, waiting for lights in the distance, those familiar lights that once brought thunder and hope together. Mara kept working, day after day, but not from desperation anymore. Now she moved with purpose, quiet but unbreakable. On the small table inside, the two rings still rested side by side, the silver one and the darkened steel band, catching the faint glow of the lamp like twin promises that time had refused to erase. Sometimes she would simply look at them, saying nothing, and in that silence she understood. Not everything lost is meant to disappear. Some things the road doesn't destroy, it reshapes. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon and the wind moved like an old memory across the sand, Mara heard it again, the deep, distant growl of a motorcycle. She didn't flinch. She smiled, closed her eyes, and let the sound wash over her, as if the spirit of the highway itself had come to visit, because she knew now that some encounters don't end when the engines fade away. They stay with you, breathing beneath your skin, reminding you that goodness, real goodness, still rides among us, even when the world forgets what it feels like. That night, the desert sky filled with stars again, and one shone brighter than the rest, flickering right above the old Route 66. Maybe it wasn't a star. Maybe it was the reflection of a faraway headlight, a Harley still riding beyond the horizon, carrying with it the memory of a widow, 2 children, and a ring that will never be sold, because now it belongs to the road. This was one of many forgotten legends of the road. Subscribe to Hell's Road and ride with us into the next story.